Hey y'all, welcome to Behind the Carnival Barkers. An irreverent behind-the-scenes podcast that interviews the craftspeople who make unscripted television. Hosted by me, Amy Peters, who is a New York-based Emmy Award-winning editor and producer of nonfiction content. Flash of White Light That Was Scott Rosann. Season 1, Episode 7.
This show is supported by KizzleKit. Make your party a hit with KizzleKit. Please shop for your fancy lifestyle accessories at KizzleKit.com. That's www.kizzlekit.com.
Hi there. It's an overcast Monday morning. I'm headed into New York City to have a chat with a very good friend of mine, Amy Peters, who's been talking to other TV professionals, editors, producers, about what it's like to work in our insane industry. I'm going to hop on the Metro North commuter train, which is one of my favorite things in the world to do. It's an absolutely beautiful trip, and I like it every time I do it.
Scott Rosann and I go way back. He even came to my wedding, although we did not manage to get a photo together.
Absolutely beautiful. You ride along the river most of the trip, and it's picturesque, and it's relaxing, and it's a great way to start the workday.
We both worked on National Geographic's The Watch, House Hunters International, and other projects over the years. He invariably has the most hilariously pragmatic sense about him, always there to keep me grounded. There's no taking yourself too seriously when he's around. Recorded in Grand Central Terminal, New York City.
Thanks for doing my podcast.
Are we starting?
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's great to see you.
You came to mind in the early iterations because you've always provided me with the perspective of not taking it so seriously or questioning its merits. I'm going to throw up my gum. Hang on. We go way back.
We met at a little production company in New York City. Scrappy little joint with a New York office and a San Francisco office, and we were in the New York office. I feel like you were brought in as an office manager or an associate producer, and I was there editing. You came in and you had all kinds of spunk. You had all kinds of ideas and an excellent sense of precisely the best moment not to shut up. And I loved that about you. It was great. It was just like a little jolt of electricity to a company that was already, even in those days. So I'm going to say this is like 2004.
It had to be 4, 5, 6-ish.
4, 5, 6
because of where I was coming from.
Okay. So let's call that, because time is a flat circle, and this period we're in now is a couple years out of COVID, but we really might as well still be saying, yeah, we just got out of COVID. Mm-hmm. So if that was a chunk of time, 2004, 5, 6, let's call that one big long year in which you showed up and gave a jolt to a company that already was sort of perhaps on the back foot. The certain types of business were drying up. Other types of business were opening. There was a lot of technological change. Final Cut was a big thing at that time. I had only just learned Avid a year or two previous to that. And it was good to have a place that was like, okay, we need an Avid editor. That's what allowed me to step in and work for them. They might not have noticed me if I was just sort of like, well, I'm teaching myself Final Cut, but because I had some Avid experience and they had all that gear, they needed to put it to use. So, an editor that just starting out, but who had that technical tool, could find a little place to work, which I did. And then I stayed for about 10 years. That company specialized mostly in things like admissions films for boarding schools and, foundations and fundraising films and things like that. And in their background, they used to hire big, expensive camera crews with beta cams and digibetas and sizable stuff, and then plug it into an Avid and cut for a few weeks, probably several weeks, probably an extravagant amount of time, because the budgets were there.
Yeah.
By the time you and I came along and met up at this place, it was already on the decline, even though the tools were getting better. We didn't have cameras this small, but we were shooting on mini DV more, and it was producing a good effect and using Final Cut Pro. And so lots of interesting little critters like you and me scuttled in and out of that place. And had a pretty good time. I mean, it was interesting times.
Well, you walked into what I ultimately wanted to get into, which is the difference the world was back then for the tools in our trade, so to speak, because I was in 2005, 6 learning Final Cut, teaching it to myself, because that was what was, I want to say commercially available, but professionals used it, but it was more accessible. And even Avid was making the transition from their hardware into a software version of itself. You didn't come up in the reality world. So what struck you when you got into?
Wow. My first gig in reality stuff was House Hunters International. You had been there immediately prior, and that was a well-oiled machine even then, and it hung on that way for a good long time. So I was impressed that they could have 10, 12, 15 edits going at once, and a pretty good way of managing equipment, editors, and the sort of story assignment board. They had a system going, and I was impressed by that, because up to that point we were working in places that were so small that you didn't have to coordinate a lot of projects. You didn't really have to work with there weren't that many cooks in the kitchen. And I know that has a pejorative sound to it, but I mean it in a good way. Like when you've got lots and lots of people engaged in churning out a show with as many episodes as House Hunters International was producing, I was impressed by the infrastructure. I was impressed by the scale. Shows like that get produced at the very edge of what they're capable of. Here I am, I'm singing the praises of all this infrastructure that they had, or a solid plan, but at the same time, they were operating at the very trailing edge of that ability, right, like all shows do. I think all reality shows and unscripted shows and documentaries always operate at the very edge of their capability, and then beyond that edge is a precipitous drop into chaos. And there's always going to be a complaint will always be in the air. There, stress and discomfort, and we should be doing this differently, is always going to be swirling around everybody involved. And I'm sure that the producers and executives feel like the creatives, the editors, and the directors and producers are probably ganging up on them, but in fact, everyone's trying to get this stuff done, same as everybody else.
Right. The show must be done.
Right.
So
right.
Between our tenures there, I believe we went from a 15-day edit schedule to a 13-day. Right?
Oh God, yeah.
So you were on 13.
I was on 13s, yeah.
So what did that do? How'd that feel?
Like getting hit in the head with a lead pipe and being left on the side of the road. It had a way of I mean, that's a short period of time to post something that had it was a formula. If that show wasn't worked out to a T in terms of it knew what it was, it knew how it worked.
Yeah. So
you could fall back on that, but the rigors of putting together a show, 5 days to radio. Not even 5 days to, it was like 3 days to radio maybe.
Then you add the dynamic of your producer,
and
if you have one.
Right. When I began, this was 2012, typically had editors and producers working, little 2-person teams. And if the producer had been able to work ahead, very often the producer was sort of wrapping up the previous show.
Right.
So as one is winding down and going through the last of its notes and going into online and, mix color, whatever else, that producer still has a lot of housekeeping to work on. So they're not necessarily working ahead on their next show. If they could work ahead on their next show, you might get to a radio cut. You might get a script in hand when you sit down to start.
Yeah.
And you might get to a radio cut in 2 or 3 days. But much more likely, they're still figuring out the story when you sit down to try to get started. And with only 13 days on the clock from literal day one, you hadn't seen a frame of footage on that day one, to, let's say, 10 days to a good, solid final cut headed to a lock.
Yeah.
You had to be just rolling on day one. You had to, absolutely be up to speed the very second your wheels hit the track. And it was very tough, very tough. How did you find it when you were on 15 days?
Oh, well, the problem I thought was the actual handing over and processing of the notes process.
Mm-hmm.
Having the producer watch it, having the EPs watch it, the network, and all the way back around. That added to the time. So it was like you could edit like the wind, but then it was like cycling through the wash, so to speak, was the most time-consuming logistical part. But I always had decent producers who knew the show, and they would sometimes, everyone was different. They'd pull verite or just do the skeleton with interviews and expect you to figure it out. But every once in a while you get a producer who would just sit there and watch the footage to make sure that, not to have control, but just to make sure that they're giving you things that are supported. And it's like, at the time I kind of took that for granted, but then I went on into the whirlwind world of ensemble shows and things where nobody knows what anything is happening and you just have to figure it out.
Yep.
So when you left the comforting embrace of House Hunters, no,
Well, it was. That's actually fair. It's a hard show to make, but it's people stay for a long time, and part of the process means that the people who are around that support you have to occasionally turn around and you're in a pitched battle, but you know that they care for you. You know that they want you to succeed. So it was a comforting embrace, you're right. But after that, right? Yeah.
I know that you're story based and you need the story radio cut to work before you do any other fluff. I don't know if that's what you call it. Talk me through your process of how you actually approach a scene.
I came to editing as on the whole from a career in writing and directing. So I never came up as an assistant editor. I didn't come to it from a technical place. I came to it from I was writing and directing things and found that to be difficult, time-consuming, tiring. And then I discovered post-production, where you have quiet rooms, sometimes if you're lucky, the ability and the time to think and plan and come up with something good, and then time to execute without a lot of, we've got to get this shot so we can make it to the plane kind of, or we're going to lose the location or whatever else. So when I discovered post-production, it was this miracle of control coming from a place of no control whatsoever, and just as creative, if not more creative. You could accomplish more with an Avid or with Final Cut Pro than you could spending an entire day out in the field hoping for the right stuff to kind of fall into place.
Right.
So, but that having been said, even though you're there, you're hired to edit. If you have a writing brain and and a story brain, that's not going to disappear. And thank God it's kind of a necessary thing, because story professionals have grown scarcer and scarcer in these jobs. They've stopped cultivating the idea of the story producer. They tend to sort of just fob that off on associates or whatever else. And it's a real skill. So coming into an edit, like a writer, you want things to really work. You want the radio cut to communicate properly. You want the ideas to be sold, even if you may not have the footage to sell it with. And with this, as you say, like coming into it so fast with insufficient time to get to know the footage, you have to you have to be able to fall back on a solid story. So I want that radio cut to really, if you closed your eyes, you could really feel like, okay, I got not only the nuts and bolts of the story, but the flavor for the characters, the idea, and the jokes, and the what's good about, what's watchable about a thing. You want to exist even before you start conceiving of it visually. Yeah. So that's what I always hope to do. Sometimes that would be a gift to your producer. Sometimes they were very appreciative to have an editor that was willing to sort of take it that closely. Sometimes it was stepping on toes, because they want to put their stamp on it. But if you're going to do that, I think you have to really turn around a script that is quite solid. And when you get or be open to the idea, like, I'm turning this over to somebody who I trust, we're going to work together to get it where it needs to go. A lot of story producers come at it with a bit of a wall up and a bit of defensiveness. And I think defensiveness in these kinds of things is like, well, there's no use for it. It's it's a collaborative art. Yeah. And yes, everyone's protecting their little sense of like, well, I hope they recognize I'm good at this. But in the end, bringing something to the table that's half complete, but you're bringing it over to someone who can finish your sentences, is like a gift. Yeah. It's like, and at that point, you're really putting something together. What's coming out of your little 2-person room, will work. It at least works for the two of you. Right. It'll then work going up the chain. Right. And I got very lucky in some of those dynamics, like good producer, or even a producer who was like good but overworked and wasn't always as buttoned up coming into the process. We sure as hell got it to a good place by halfway through, so that we were really humming together and made something that was really the product of both of our brains. Right.
So cut to over a decade later, at the cusp of the beginning of COVID and how everything changed.
Gosh, yeah.
Well, can you talk about situations where you brought your writing skills but were probably frustrated by no time for it, no space for it? Because I've definitely come swinging, ready to do a story thing because I perceived that was what I was supposed to do, but then it's like, no, we're not doing that. So I don't know. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Very first thing I did after House Hunters was an expensive, complicated, multi-camera experimental show that you were on as well. And this was a major, formative thing for me and for a lot of other editors that we know. It's like, really, you're thrown in. It's not even important sort of what the dynamic of the show was. It was just this sort of a task so massive. It was a pitch so audacious and not fully filled in. It was like, a great premise. It's like, oh, we'll run cameras 24 hours a day on some people in a remote location. Similar, I guess, to a network show like Survivor, but with no structure, no game. They wanted a weird show about weird people in a weird place and produced in about the weirdest way you could do it. And so we did all that, came to it. And then when it came time to sort of really chisel story out of that stuff, they had a few very gifted field producers who came back and moved into post, and because of their familiarity with the material, became story producers. So there were resources there. There wasn't a scripting period for that show. Right. So we were thrown in with note cards of what a general scene would be, or what, here's a setup. And then we were just told sift through 60 hours of footage to find the direction on this one note card that's in an entire hour-long 6-act field of note cards. And it's like, go ahead, give that a shot. And then boom, and needless to say, it didn't go off successfully. But I learned so much about, again, putting your heads together with other editors in the hallway. We'd spend a lot of time in each other's edit rooms, kind of just talking about like, well, how are you approaching that thing you're doing? But what fell by the wayside was a real sense of, let's see what's in the material, what's in the footage to work with. And that kind of became an afterthought, which made it very hard to chisel story out of it. So that's one thing that changed, was like, hey, you can add more cameras to this. It's like, well, that's not necessarily going to give you better story,
And that's a good example of a world where I was trying to help, I guess, because I could get a stationed camera, have the character walk through it and do cool fades between where he was in the frame and whatever effects. But if he wasn't going anywhere, if it wasn't covering anything in particular, it just made it very hard.
Yep.
And I'll never forget Ilya cut this amazing, hilarious sequence with the barnyard animals in the Montana story.
Yep.
And it was so good, but then because we had to be literal about day-night transitions, we couldn't use it.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
it was
that
so
came
good.
Right, and I think we were encouraged to do a lot of really crazy things. And so we all would try stuff like that, but then suddenly it would all get scuttled on the rocks of, but that's day and this is night, and it's not going from here to here, which as a story person I would ordinarily be a stickler for. It's like, this follows that. But with something that magical to work with, you find a way to weave that in. And they didn't seem as patient with, they set us off creating weird baubles, like weird little gems and weird little, things and put it on a golden string, and then would get all caught up. It looked beautiful, with interesting little things, and then they'd just get all caught up with, no, this one has to go before this one. And it's like, yes, it does, but, and they just weren't flexible enough to really get all that stuff to go. So the stuff that wound up, the pieces that we spent weeks cutting to good effect, barnyard animals in multi-layers, ghosts appearing in and out of frame, and people sort of like, comped in with themselves at different times, all kind of like fell on the floor and got swept away. That was that was one of those really beautiful tragedies. Because I think we all, the rigors of putting that show together, we all got our asses kicked very, very hard on that show. But it produced, again, these sort of lifelong friendships, brought people who were already friends even closer together. And it's just this shared thing of like, you're never going to see and experience that weird again. And I think it made better editors out of all of us, frankly.
Oh, yeah. It was a good experience at the end of the day. And I feel like it's something I'm going to always go back to, really, because the vision was great. The sizzle was great.
Neat idea.
But let's shift gears to like the true crime genre, because to me, you're funny in how you can talk about how it's a reflection of the most grossest parts of society in a way. So talk to me about your feelings on true crime or that exploitative stuff.
I think true crime, as popular as it is, and it's been a gift to our industry to have this much absolutely reliably sought after content. The audiences for it are ravenous. That's a gift to production companies. That's a gift to producers to find a genre that is so beloved. I don't mean to get highfalutin about it, or to talk in some highly theoretical space, but it's. I think it's a symptom of a tired and frightened and worn out society that we would decide that the thing we like to do to relax is watch endless stories of people's, not just the worst day in their life, but the worst day in the life of a community, the worst day in the life of a household, a town, a state, a country.
Responding police.
And all the pressures of holding a community together, all the municipal pressures. Imagine the pressure that police forces are under and that investigators are under when violence is omnipresent.
Yeah.
And then let's go ahead and just point our cameras at that and stick our fingers in the wound and stir it around, and to have such beloved work product come out of that, to the point where when people see it and they see the effect it has on the audience, they say, well, we got to have all those dollars. We have to have all those eyes at all times. Yeah. And so you wind up with what we have now, which is a culture dominated by people who do nothing but think of crimes. Yeah. And so as an editor, you're like, well, that's where all the work is. I guess I'll just do that 24/7. You know, that's where all the gigs are, and I'm good at it and I can do it, and people want to hire me to do it. So I guess that's where my bread and butter is going to come from. So with more and more jobs in true crime turning up, and fewer other types of shows being made, there was a period of time where it looked like all editors were going to be able to do, certainly on the East Coast, was crime shows. Yeah. And that really put the fear in me of like, I don't know how long I can do this for, because I found it just bad for my soul. Like it's crude stuff.
Well, you mentioned the job market. That's a lot of what people are breathing in and out anxiety about. What's your personal story with navigating freelance and trying to stay employed?
It's as difficult as it is for anybody. You know, I had as difficult a time as anybody could. I always worked. And I think I had a few outlets for doing corporate work. Web content and Instagram were taking off for corporate entities. You know, everybody wanted their little Instagram videos. So they would say to me in between shows, like, oh my God, it's great that you're available. Do you want to come work on this for 4 weeks or 3 weeks? So I was always able to kind of fill in between shows. But it was clear that those nice long gigs, you know, the 3-month gig working on a show began to turn into the 1.5-month gig with a hold period, but then that back end of the thing would never happen. You know, it's like you'd have, oh yeah, we're not putting it all back together, or oh, just yeah, our house editor is going to now take all these shows that are, you know, everyone's been working on different episodes and take them all to fruition and deliver them. So we're not going to need you for the back half, that last 3 weeks or whatever it is. So you'd watch chunks of your committed engagement kind of just disappear, fade off into some, or just drop off the edge of the table. You know, it's like, so that happened to everybody all at once. And now I think there's nothing but that. They only make the first 3 weeks of commitment.
Yeah.
And then they say, oh, by the way, we're going to do 42 minutes of content in that 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And let's try to get it to a pick lock. And it's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's not going to work. Mm-hmm. But they try.
Yeah. It's just piecemeal in how they get it across the finish line. So it never made sense to me. Why are you making a schedule that you know isn't going to work? And then they're like, that's just what we had to pass, knowing. Because these are experienced, seasoned production companies, you know exactly what it takes to make something, yet they still hire you for those 3 to 6 to 8 weeks, and no show results because it wouldn't.
Right.
Or they don't want to spend time on figuring out the pilot and then doing the other stuff.
Certainly not.
COVID changed how people work, aka work from home. Can you talk about what the work from home dynamic did for you or against you? Were you one of those people who needs to be with other people? Like, how did that affect you?
I thrived in it. Mostly because I found it really helpful to be able to log in. You know, the older I've gotten at least the less I sleep or the less well I sleep. So if I'm up in the night, and not all the time, but there was a period where it's like, it was helpful to me to be able to log in when I was awake anyway, and that this stuff was sort of rattling around in my head, and you could get up, log into a headless machine, and figure something out. Even if it was just a little piece of a scene that wasn't working, you could arrive at some sort of like, okay, great. Now there was no plan when I stumbled over here. Now there's a bit of a plan. When I confront this in the morning, I've got a starting point, or I've cracked something that I was having a hard time cracking. And you can only do that with remote work. I think office time is great for that first thing that I mentioned, and something that I crave and I miss a lot is that ability to peek your head out of your edit room, look down the hall, see who else's head was peeking out, start a conversation, blow off a little steam, whatever it was. That's a gift that was absolutely sacrificed. But just in terms of tackling a hard show, it was much more beneficial as a way to work, to be able to sort of work in your own environment and build it around my own weird time. And for parents of kids and things like that, it allowed a lot of jobs to simply happen. That couldn't happen any other way. If you want to spend time with your family, the old way we used to do it, well, you're going to find a way to say, no, I come in at 9 and I leave at 6. And I take an hour in the middle of the day to call my kids' teachers, or it's like I really shut the door and clock out and do some of my life stuff on my lunch hour. And that's going to happen. That's going to be super rigid. And I'm not staying a minute after 6, even if a cut is due, because I've got to relieve the nanny, whatever it is. That's all different now in the remote environment, and it's allowed a lot of people I know who are young parents to take jobs they couldn't take any other way. There's a significant downside to it as well, which is suddenly all these shows are creeping into your time you have with your family. And I know plenty of people who have not coped so well with that dynamic. But for the most part, at the very least, it gave everybody a place where you could contend for the jobs you wanted and probably get decent results for the producers out of it. So I was always a big fan of remote.
A lot of people are describing trouble keeping employed post strikes, like even my scripted friends. How are you keeping your head above water in all this?
Well, I had a lightning strike of luck. There was a job posted for an editor in the digital department at CBS News, 60 Minutes, a show that I grew up from before I could speak or walk. That was on in the house, for me. The show's about as old as I am. And those big signature, hallowed TV properties, TV series that have been around for a long time don't then turn around and post on LinkedIn. So I thought it was fake, but I applied, and I wrote a cover letter that was as thoughtful, I hoped, as if it was going to be read by a tiny company, a person picking 10 cover letters on a desk. And I think that was the key to getting the job. But anyway, to back up a little bit, I didn't know anybody at CBS. I didn't know anybody in news, but gave it an honest, solid swing. So I now work on the digital arm of a major, respected 55-year-old news program, just in time to watch the entire news industry implode. And just in time for the network and the show itself to become embroiled in lawsuits, corporate maneuverings, a government writ large that is more and more interested in dissolving the rock steady, well-established way that news organizations cover government. The crux of all that is, just as I was seeing no future in reality, wanted no future in crime shows. Like if I do 6 crime shows a year, I'm going just to explode in a bright flash of light in my chair. So going from all that, seeing the opportunities dwindle, seeing the market just the bottom fall out of the job market completely, and along comes this random posting, and suddenly I'm one of 2 digital editors at CBS News 60 Minutes. So how did I deal with it? I got astonishingly lucky.
Yeah. Are you the one who edited Kamala?
I did the overtime segment that was a companion to that interview, yes. I worked with that interview material.
So you're the one.
No, I'm not. No, I didn't do the broadcast. That's another editor in another room, but I did work with that interview. And I know exactly what happened. And I can't say too much because there's all this fraught stuff hanging in the air around it. But what I will say is the people who do this stuff have been doing it for a long time. They are exceedingly good at it. They are as professional as anyone has ever been in any profession. And that's not putting too fine a point on it. These people are experts at this. And they know what the pitfalls are. So they behaved with all the ethics and all of the careful controls we apply to doing a high profile and high stakes interview, the impulse to do it right.
Yeah, and professionally.
And professionally.
And by the book. What about the pivot? Like if you had to pivot, what would it be?
Our kids have grown up in this generation where they have been creators from the day they, could pick up a crayon. And we were too, but you never had any place besides your parents' refrigerator where you could put that creativity. These kids have been creating and publishing with the same muscles that they've learned to walk and talk, and have done it for the same amount of their lives, their waking lives. This is a generation of publishers. The idea that you could make something with a phone, it's like, well, you've just been given a movie studio. And that's perhaps not the right word for it, because who wants to make a movie when you could just simply make your video diary, your endless expression doled out in little pieces, postage stamp sized, and all day long, boom, boom, boom. And you've been raised in a culture that says that's not weird. And so kids know what it took us forever to develop and cultivate as a set of professional tools. Kids have them. The same way you learn to look both ways when you cross the street, you learn, well, you don't post your Instagram thing on Monday night, you post it on Tuesday morning, or whatever it is. They just somehow know this stuff. So what's the pivot? B16 is the pivot. For us, I don't know that there's a lesson we could learn. What I would say is, and what I was on the verge of doing right before lightning struck, I was about to give it all up and find something brand new to do. That's a very sad message for editors. And it's not for everybody. I'm not saying everyone needs to look at their career that way. But I really did see the opportunities for happiness dwindling precipitously when I made this change in my career.
In how the market is changing, the job market is changing for editors, but also the field of content, because you spoke to content we don't necessarily love to make, but people love to voraciously consume. With the world kind of shaping up in this way, what do you see as the future for editors, people like us who just don't have a chair anymore?
It's tough to say what's going to happen and where the opportunities are going to be. It was always tough to say that, and it's infinitely tougher now. What I think is that we have a certain perspective, fairly unique among people who work in media, because we're shooters a little bit, we're writers a little bit, we're actors a little bit. And I'm not saying we pick up the gear and do these things. I'm saying as you cut a piece and scrutinize a performance and chisel out a story, you make yourself a little bit of each of those things while you work. That being the case, we have access to a lot of skill sets that we're not necessarily paid to use all the time or consider or make, the things that we consider our job description. In a lot of ways, that opens up a lot of intangible opportunity. We bring a lot of our sensitivity to editing. We bring a lot of that ability to know and understand human behavior and know and understand storytelling and how it needs to function so that an audience can get what they need out of it. That AI isn't particularly good at capturing those cues. In fact, it's decidedly bad at it because it doesn't have a heart and it doesn't have a brain. If there's anything to a world where anyone can publish anything, for good or for ill, editors are in a great position to be able to stop and say, what is it that I want to say? What do I think isn't being said now? What do I maybe want to venture and speak out about? What do I perhaps want to publish? And then having the know-how, and in some cases the tools, and coworkers and colleagues to bounce it off of. That's an enormous creative stock of workable assets, let's say. I think more people should probably do what you were doing. And I think because work begets work, because you're doing something and not nothing, because you're shoving something around with your hands instead of simply sitting and staring and bemoaning, that will lead to something else, which will lead to something else. You probably wind up a million miles from where you thought you would, but doing nothing only ever produces nothing. So that's what I would say is do this, this thing you're doing.
Thanks for doing the podcast. I appreciate you coming in.
Thank you. Thanks so much. This is so much fun.
Yeah.
I hope you all enjoyed hearing from Scott as much as I did. Not only is he a great storyteller, but he's had my back more than a few times. It's clear that a strong story sense, but also a collaborative spirit are exactly what you need to navigate our crazy industry, so it's always good having a pal like him around. I'd like to thank Scott for taking the time to talk with me. You can find him online at scottrosann.com. That's SCOTTROSANN.com. Music in this episode is provided by DJ Williams, whose work you can find on YouTube at DJW Music, also linked in the show notes. Post-production services are provided by Audio Photosynthesis. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Kizzlekit. To shop for your very own lifestyle accessories, go to www.kizzlekit.com. That's KIZZLEKIT.com. Please follow us on social media for the schedule, upcoming guests, and other programming notes and updates. Sign up for our newsletter at carnivalbarkers.substack.com. And please, please, please hit that like button if you enjoyed the conversation.